Right. When I did my little video on the hunting with the air rifle books, um, I had a request from somebody to say, could I cover other books as well that I had perhaps in my collection, and do a bit of a review on what sort of books were any good, which ones were a waste of time, and which ones might be of a bit of interest to those who hunt. Now, a lot of air gunners, of course, have also not just air gunners, they're shooting men. A lot of them have had lurchers, quite a few have had ferrets and terriers, and like myself, over the years. And eventually, a lot of people, a lot of air gunners, sporting men, women, of course, end up with a huge selection of books that they've gathered over the years. And these are mine, or some of mine. Now, for those who don't know me, and that's probably most of you, I started my hunting career out many years ago, originally with ferrets and small nondescript terriers that were owned by my dad. And I've had ferrets since I was a tiny child. And then eventually I discovered the love of Patterdales. A friend of mine had one. I was only a kid, still in school, and he was a lot older. He ran a bit of a bobbery pack, something that Plummer hated, bobbery packs. He was never a fan of those. And basically, he'd bought a young Patterdale Terrier from a Nuttall strain, and it was too much, too aggressive. It was causing loads of aggro. So I swapped it for a couple of ferreting nets and a ferret box, and that became the foundation strain of the terriers that I've still got even to this day. And I'll just show you a photograph of one of my first ones. This is a very old photograph of me when I was in my late teenage years, complete with the obligatory scraggy little moustache that every teenager back then tried to grow so you can get in the pubs early. And this is Meg, which was one of my first Patterdale Terriers and probably the best dog, all-round terrier that I've ever had. This dog, I trained her to shoot, out shooting as a gun dog. She'd dig anything at all with her. She never let me down, never quit on anything to earth. She was a fantastic dog. I was out every day after school with this dog, every single day. I'd get home, get my terrier, and I'd be out with my shotgun, my air rifle, the ferrets, doing something with her. And she was such a good dog with a gun, retrieving, that she actually came third in a local open gun dog scurry. When I persuaded the chap that was judging it to let me enter my terrier, he thought it was a bit of a joke, and she actually came third. She was fantastic. The only thing she was a little bit hard-mouthed on anything that she retrieved that was shot. And this picture actually is quite an interesting picture because this was actually taken by a chap called Jeff Worrell that actually founded Tideline Books. Now, me and Jeff became quite good friends because I bought lots of books off him. And he also used, Jeff was quite famous for reprinting books and whatnot. And he used a couple of my dog's photographs in some of his books. And that was taken by Jeff when we were out on a dig. And he took some pictures of Meg working. And that was taken by Jeff Worrell, a very nice, decent bloke that owned Tideline Books. And here's another picture. This is a daughter of Meg and a granddaughter of Meg, and that's one of my first lurchers. It was a Norfolk type lurcher, great hair dog, good all-round dog, and he was the type that I had before I got into collie grounds. Now, I mentioned Jeff Worrell, and as you can see, an awful lot of these were printed by Tideline Books, the original ones. That's a Tideline Books reprint. And Plummer was one of my favourite writers, I must admit. And this is one of his best books, I think. This book's great. Earth Dog Running Dogs, or Rogues and Running Dogs, rather. And I love this book. It's a very early one, and this is a very early print. And again, you see, Tideline Books, when it... Kimmel Street in Rill. Now, Jeff died, many, many, many years ago, and the company fell to another member of his family, who eventually got too old and actually sold the business and most of the books, sold most of the books, to another Welsh sporting book company, Cockabundu Books. And you'll notice that they've got a lot of books that are branded as Tideline because they bought the entire stock. It was actually offered to me at the time. Like I say, I was a friend of the family, and they offered it to me as a going concern, but unfortunately at the time I didn't have the available funds to buy the business. But that's a very early Rogues and Running Dogs that I've got there. A really early one. In fact, I think it's a first print, that actually. I'm sure it's a first print. So I'm quite proud of that one. Another early Plummer book that I've got is Modern Ferreting. Again, this was actually a signed copy. Old Brian. I hunted with him once, spoke to him many a time at shows and things, before he became a bit reclusive and a bit miserable. At one time he wasn't quite as, well, I hate to say it about the guy, but he got a bit up his own arse eventually, which was very sad. But originally he was actually a really nice chap, very knowledgeable, and his first books were superb. This is brilliant, this book. That was really good book. He actually signed that for me at the Midland Game Fair. That one, years ago. So I'm quite chuffed with those two because they're quite early ones. And here is a very rare first edition copy of his very first book. And again, bought it from Tideline Books. And this one was when he printed this book before he'd got a publishing deal with anybody. So he actually printed this. Plummer printed this himself. It's been reprinted many times since by different companies. Boydell redid an issue of it. Boydell Press. I think Tideline Books did a reprint of it. But this, as you can see, is a very, very first edition one published by Brian himself. And this again is a really good book, and I'm quite proud of this book, quite pleased I've got this book because it's quite a rarity. So those are the three sort of really early Plummer books. That one, first one he ever made, really good book. This one, the one that probably made him famous after his famous interview where his ferret bit the interviewer on the hand. It's always on those sort of look what happened next type programmes on the telly, but that's the one that really launched his career in writing. And then that one, probably, I think that's probably his best book that he ever wrote. I love that book. And I also, myself, managed to sneak into one of his books. And I'll just show you. This is a reprint of Plummer's The Fell Terrier. And if you look at this picture of the, I'm sure it was a Midland Game Fair. It might have been the Fell and Moreland show, actually, in Llangollen, which at one time was a very popular show. And this was Gary Middleton. And if you look in the background, it's me. When I was very young. That show was like one of the highlights of our year around here. All the local terrier lads had nipped down to that, and it was a great show, and ended up being in the Fell Terrier book. So as you can see, I've got all the Plummer's books, including the centenary books after his death. the limited edition box set from Tideline Books. And then the other one that I've got that I'm quite pleased about is a copy of My Life with Lurchers. And this one again, this one was another one signed by Hancock, because I bought my Collie Ground, my initial Collie Ground stock from Hancock. Really good bloke. Again, I don't know, lost the plot a little bit, I suppose. He was always a bit more honest than Plummer was. Plummer got a bit up his own bum in the end, I'm afraid to say. But Hancock, straight guy. If you went to him, you knew what you were getting. You know, he was dead straight with you what he'd bred. And I bought a brilliant Collie Ground out of a bitch called Sally 2. And the dog was Rufus the Red. That was the Collie, pardon me, that I put over him. And it was a brilliant lurcher. And that dog lived to be 22 years old. The other author I'm quite keen on is young Davy Harkham. Now, I used to write for Earth Dog Running Dog, which was like a monthly publication that he used to do. In fact, I think he still does. And I wrote for that for a long time. And I like Harkham's books. Harkham's books are really good. They're all working terrier based. But if you want decent, real life, nitty gritty working terrier books, Harkham's books are brilliant. You know, they pull no punches. They're great books. Love them. And then more general stuff that we tend to collect. Books on deer. As you might have seen in some of my pictures, I've got a lot of deer trophies about the place. So I've got plenty of books on deer. All the Plummer books. Some of the classics. Animal Traps and Trapping by Bateman. That's a brilliant book. Fox Hunting in the Lakeland Fells by Clapham. Excellent book. That's a very old first edition copy. That's a really good one. I've got Pugs and Drummers by Marchington, who also was a very keen air gunner and used to write quite frequently for the very early Airgun World magazines. But he was also an incredibly good ferreting man. Tons of ferreting books, just all sorts of really. And, you know, these are the sort of things that you build up over the years. And they're always fascinating. Wet, horrible, miserable day, or if you're stuck in bed with a cold or something, or you've hurt yourself, and you've got stuck in and you can't get out. You can't beat a good book. The internet's all right, but you can't beat a good book. You really can't. So there you go. Some of my book collection in more detail. Like I say, over the years you build up books, and some of these are really rare and you just don't see them anymore. They're out of print, a lot of them, and a lot of these are very rare first editions, and they're just lovely. And they've all got, or a lot of them have got, sort of quite sort of personal attachments, some of them. Like I say, especially these, you know, actually being a photograph. I mean, all right, it's only in the background in that one, the old Fell Terrier. And then that being his first book, made up, that I bought that. It's Plummer's very first book. Modern Ferreting, a signed copy. Don't see many of them. And then the old Rogues and Running Dogs, another first edition. So yeah, so made up with those. So that's what you sort of end up with over the years. So it's not all just about air gunning. Like I say, I've done a fair old bit with the dogs over the years. Still got my same strain of Patterdale Terrier that I had from when I was in school. Still got the ferrets. Don't run lurchers anymore because I never had the time, wouldn't have the time really, to train a dog as good as that Collie Ground, the last one I had that died. Took so long to train that dog these days haven't got the time to put into a decent running dog, so I've never bothered. I still judge Lurcher and Terrier shows every now and again in the summer, and it's great fun, and it's great fun as well to meet up with the old boys that are still doing it. Some of them were like a lot older than me, and they're still out there working their dogs. It's great to see. So it's not all about air guns, and I'm pretty sure that most people that have got air guns have got plenty of other sporting interests as well. And these are the sorts of things that they're going to end up with eventually. Different books on all sorts of different things. So thanks for watching. And I hope some of these books might give you some ideas of a decent read to get. eBay's a great place to buy them. They come up second-hand copies all the time from these companies that recycle books, and you can get some of these really cheap. Some are very expensive though, but some are really cheap. So keep your eye open, especially at these times when a lot of people are self-isolating and stuck inside off work. It's always handy to have something to read. Don't forget to subscribe.